Question number 3, David Bennett.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister responsible for Housing New Zealand Corporation. How will changes to Housing New Zealand help meet the government's objective of providing more quality housing to New Zealanders most in need?
Order. Order. Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the government's changes in social housing, which were well signalled in legislation last year, are focused on providing quality social housing to more New Zealanders. That is housing in the right place, the right condition, the right size, with the right kind of support services for New Zealanders who most need them. These changes will put tenants' needs at the centre of our housing policy rather than the number of houses owned by one entity, Housing Corp New Zealand. One way we are going to improve the quality of housing is to open up the social housing sector to more other providers, as happens in almost all other developed economies, so we have more choices about where those who are in serious housing need can have those needs met. The government will continue to maintain at least the current number of households eligible for income-related rents, which is around 60,600.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, David Bennett.
How does the government's program to improve the performance of Housing New Zealand fit within its overall approach to delivering better public services to New Zealanders?
Well, Mr Speaker, our overall approach with better public services is to get better results for people rather than have more programs for government departments. Or in this case, we'll be measuring our success on meeting serious housing need rather than on how much we spend on investing in state houses. We found that what works for people when we get good results works for the government's books. With housing, our focus is going to be on ensuring we have the kind of choices that we need to ensure that those in serious housing need have their needs met, but also that they can move to housing independence rather than being reliant on the government for housing subsidies for the rest of their lives.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, David Bennett.
Over the past few years, what steps has the government taken to prepare for Housing New Zealand's new approach to providing housing to those in need?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the government's program has been well signalled for the last 4 years. In 2010, we published a detailed report from the Housing Shareholders Advisory Group. In 2011, we set up the Social Housing Unit, which has spent $130 million on subsidies to the community housing sector already. Last year, we passed the Social Housing Reform Act, opening up social housing to approved non-government providers. And in April 2014, the assessment of social housing applications moved to the Ministry of Social Development.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, why did Housing New Zealand wait until just after the election to place 4 units in Waioni Street, Petone, opposite the beach, which had been wrongly evacuated 2 years previously as earthquake risks and the subject of hundreds of thousands of dollars of vandalism on the market?
Well, Mr Speaker,
you
would need to talk to Housing New Zealand, but I think it's an indication of the growing pressure on them to perform, that they are now taking action to redevelop that site.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Why is Housing New Zealand favouring developers and landlords over ordinary Kiwi families wanting to get their first home by requiring that all 4 of these units be sold as a block rather than individually, despite them being on individual titles?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, that is a very good question. We'd be quite happy to see Housing Corp selling some of its units to hard-working Kiwi families who find those units affordable. But I'd have to say they have been under some constraint both from this government and previous government stopping them doing that. I've never really understood why that is the case, but I'm happy to take up the member's cause with Housing Corp New Zealand.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, David Bennett.
How will the government improve the way Housing New Zealand manages its portfolio to provide better housing for tenants?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, firstly, I think the government certainly takes the view that with an asset valued at $18.7 billion, we can do better than having too many people living in garages around New Zealand. We must be able to use that $18.7 billion better. Secondly, Mr Speaker, Housing New Zealand will start to realise that some of their houses are in the wrong place, that in the past they've taken a bit long to change tenants over in their houses, because they'll start feeling the pressure of other providers who may do a better job.
Supplementary question.
Order. Order. Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
How is it good use of an investment to have 4 units empty and subject to about, for 2 years, subject to about $500,000 worth of damage, when the 5th unit in the block, previously sold by Housing New Zealand, has had a tenant in it through that time under a sublease arrangement whereby that individual tenant is a Housing New Zealand tenant?
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, on the face of it, as the member describes it, that arrangement doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's an indication of the amount of improvement of performance we can get from Housing New Zealand, and also an improved supply of affordable housing to the market under the reforms the government's putting in place.
Order. Question number 4, Right Honourable Winston Peters. Order. Order. Right Honourable Winston Peters.